I've been looking at the NATO activities. I mean, they've just bombed the river of fresh water. They've bombed the factory that creates the pipes to repair the river. I mean, these are war crimes. These are acts of genocide, really.
Well, I haven't actually seen those reports. There's been nothing on the international news about the bombing of the great man-made river, which is the largest irrigation project in the world. That would be a war. Gaddafi could have. The Libyan government forces had the ability to shut off all the water for a couple of months now, to shut off all the water to Benghazi, which they didn't do because they don't want the Libyan people there to suffer unnecessarily. So, but I think probably the biggest war crime is the use of depleted uranium. And now I think from the very beginning, some of us that have studied the use of depleted uranium in Iraq recognize the signature fireballs and damage done to the Libyan armor as being depleted uranium. The former director of the Pentagon's depleted uranium program said so. The reports now that Libyan scientists detected high levels of radiation around some of these armor. So the thing about depleted uranium is that after the actual use of nuclear weapons itself, the use of depleted uranium is the second worst war crime there is, because when the depleted uranium warheads hit the armor, they incinerate. They burn at very high temperatures. The depleted uranium becomes after incineration becomes a very microscopic powder. It's measured in the 4 millionths of an inch in microns, and the fireball created takes it up into high altitudes and it's dispersed across the land. It's got thousands of years long in half-life. It's nonspecific. It's particularly dangerous with pregnant women and children, small children and infants, and that it sticks around for thousands of years. We've got this huge problem in Fallujah in Iraq. The U.S. used it in the Fallujah uprising. The American military used it against the population in Fallujah in 2003. Now they've got something like 25% of all the babies born there are born with deformities. Another 25% of the children, by the time they're 5 years old, have come down with cancer, leukemia. And this is an enormous crime that they've just come in under the pretext of protecting Libyan civilians and poison their country in many ways permanently. So I think the bombing, I haven't been able to confirm the bombing of the Great Man-Made River, but that would be an enormous crime if that took place.
Why did NATO launch the war against Libya now?
Well, they wanted to get rid of Gaddafi for a long time. Gaddafi has long been the Arab boogeyman in North Africa, but I think the situation got just right for the CIA to try to step in and implement a contingency plan for many years. But basically, what Gaddafi has been doing has been setting up a African investment bank with some $42 billion, of which 30-some billion was in American banks and got basically confiscated. But he was going to provide low or interest-free loans to Africa, and in effect eliminate the influence of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and other major European banks, which have been using predatory loans to destroy African economies and control African natural resources for decades now. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is there's reports that because of the Lockerbie sanctions that U.S. forced through the Security Council,
which are based upon lies, the CIA, now it's turned out that the CIA paid millions of dollars to witnesses in the Lockerbie case to change their story, and that now it's come out that it was a complete fabrication, that Libya was involved in this bombing, and Gaddafi's turned around and said, look, you guys put sanctions, the United States put sanctions on Libya, it cost us billions, tens of billions of dollars. The sanctions lasted for over a decade. American oil companies are going to have to reimburse us for all these billions of dollars. And I think that came out just shortly before this whole so-called rebellion broke out. And the other thing is, too, that it's become very clear that Gaddafi is seeing the way forward, not only for Libya, but for Africa in general, as being working with the Chinese and maybe the Russians. And that, for example, he had about $30 billion worth of contracts in Libya with Chinese companies. He's encouraging African countries to work with the Chinese. For example, like in Sudan, the major oil fields there were developed by the Chinese. So I think the West realized that, well, look, this they had this so-called Arab Spring. They call it a revolution. I just call it an explosion, and that they could take advantage of that and try to start this overthrow of Gaddafi. Now, I think if we look at, for example, Amnesty International, who does have some honest people working in it, and their representative that spent 3 months in Benghazi after the uprising broke out, and what did they say? Their report: no rapes in Libya. They couldn't find a single woman that had been raped. They couldn't find a single doctor that had even had rape reported to him. As far as African mercenaries, they couldn't confirm a single report of African mercenaries. No helicopter gunships attacking civilians. No Libyan aircraft bombing civilians. So much for their no-fly zone used to justify this whole intervention. Okay, and on top of that, the total number of dead in Benghazi before the NATO started its war in Libya, the total number of dead was 110, and that included Gaddafi supporters. Now, 110, and that's grounds to come in and intervene. Over 800 were murdered by the police in Cairo, in Egypt. And to this day, there's been over 1,100 civilians killed by NATO bombings, including over 400 women and children. So the whole reasons for the attack on Libya were completely bogus. They were all based on lies and fabrications, and it has surpassed the lies used to justify the Iraq War, so the invasion of Iraq.